All right, let's dive in. This time, we're heading to Scotland using the Love Scotland newsletter as our guide.
Sounds fun.
It's packed with these charming little articles, like snapshots from a friend who's totally smitten with the country, not just touristy stuff either,
Yeah, I noticed that. It really gets into what makes Scotland unique.
especially the food, right?
Oh, absolutely.
They mention traditional Scottish petticoat tail shortbread.
A classic.
The name itself has me intrigued, and cooey, a list of 44 must-try Scottish foods and drinks. Petticoat tail shortbread. Okay, you've got to tell me, is it as good as it sounds?
It really is delightful. Buttery, crisp shortbread with just the right amount of sweetness. Perfect with a cup of tea.
I'm adding that to my list right now. And cooey, what's that all about? Something to do with cows?
Not quite.
Yeah.
Coo in Scots is like saying look or see. So coo is more like look at this. And there's a lot to look at when it comes to Scottish food. The newsletter recommends this list because it covers everything from traditional dishes like haggis to more modern stuff you'd find in a trendy Glasgow restaurant.
Haggis. Now, there's something I've always been curious about. It has quite the reputation, doesn't it?
It does, but it's one of those things you just have to experience for yourself. What's fascinating is how haggis, which was a simple peasant dish, made with sheep's offal, has become a symbol of national pride.
Real.
There's a whole ceremony around it, poems and toasts. And it's often served with neeps and tatties, mashed turnips and potatoes.
Wow, a whole ceremony. It's like more than just a meal, it's a cultural event. That's what I love about these deep dives. So besides food, what else does this newsletter highlight?
Well, they talk about 8 different cities across Scotland, each one with its own personality. But they focus on Edinburgh and Glasgow to show the contrast between historical charm and modern vibrancy.
Edinburgh's the grand old city, and Glasgow's the cool younger sibling.
Exactly. Think cobbled streets and castles for Edinburgh, and then Glasgow's all about cutting-edge architecture, music venues, and a booming art scene, like two sides of the same coin.
This newsletter's really showcasing the heart of the country. I'm getting caught up in it. What else did you find interesting?
The Around the Web section was packed with cool stuff. The return of the torchlight procession for Hogmanay, for instance, their New Year's Eve celebration.
Oh, I've heard of that.
It's huge. Thousands of people with flaming torches marching through Edinburgh, ending with fireworks over the castle.
Wow, that's a visual I can get behind.
And there's a new exhibition at Blackness Castle, this imposing fortress right on the coast.
I've seen pictures of Blackness Castle.
It's about the influence of folklore on Scottish life. Mythical creatures, ancient traditions, superstitions, the whole shebang.
Blackness Castle and folklore. That's right up my alley. I've always been fascinated by how folklore reflects a culture. It's like looking into a nation's soul. What else?
They also highlight some environmental research. A report about threatened shark, ray, and skate species around Scotland's coast.
Wait, sharks off the coast of Scotland? I never would have thought.
It's fascinating, right? A lot of these species are endangered, so the research is crucial for conservation. And it turns out Scotland's waters are surprisingly diverse. Some species you wouldn't expect in a colder climate.
See, this is what I love about these deep dives. Always learning something new. Okay, what else did you find?
Well, there's this campaign encouraging tourists on the North Coast 500 road trip to pledge against irresponsible tourism.
Oh, the North Coast 500. I've seen photos. Absolutely breathtaking. Imagine driving those coastal roads, wind in your hair, maybe even spotting some dolphins.
It's definitely a dream trip. But with so many visitors, responsibility is key. This campaign's all about ensuring tourism doesn't harm the environment or disrupt the lives of the people living in the Highlands. Being mindful, supporting local businesses, leaving no trace.
It's so important. Responsible travel is crucial, especially in places like the Highlands. Respect for the land and the people is paramount.
Absolutely. And it was back to that idea of experiencing the true Scotland, engaging with the country on a deeper level, appreciating its beauty without damaging it.
I love that sentiment. It's about more than just taking photos. It's about leaving a positive impact. So we've got food, culture, history, responsible travel. What else is in store for us?
The newsletter highlights Glasgow's top 10 places to visit. They paint a picture of the city's architecture, this blend of Victorian and contemporary styles. It creates some pretty stunning visuals.
It makes me wonder what it's actually like to live in Glasgow. Is it as cool and edgy as it sounds?
From what I've gathered, Glasgow embraces its industrial past while constantly pushing boundaries. It's a hub for artists and musicians, a real creative energy in the streets. Old shipyards have been transformed into cultural centers, Victorian warehouses into trendy galleries and shops. A city reinventing itself while staying true to its roots.
Now I'm really picturing it. Cobbled streets, vintage shops, towering modern buildings. It's like history and innovation colliding.
And their food scene reflects that too. Traditional Scottish breakfasts in cozy cafes, Michelin-starred restaurants and converted factories. It's a city full of surprises.
Okay, Glasgow's officially on my list. And speaking of travel, the newsletter mentions something important for anyone thinking of visiting Scotland in 2024.
They recommend booking everything in advance because of high demand. Scotland's becoming very popular, and for good reason. So if you're dreaming of Edinburgh or the Highlands, plan ahead.
Great advice. Don't want to miss out because of last-minute scrambling. Okay, before we move on, one last thing that caught my eye. The newsletter snippet about the thistle, Scotland's national flower. They talk about its resilience, how it thrives even in urban settings.
Oh yes, the thistle.
It's like a symbol of the Scottish spirit. Tough, adaptable, finding a way to bloom even amidst the city.
A perfect analogy. The thistle, like the Scottish people, has weathered a lot and come out stronger. That resilience is something special.
I agree. Okay, we've covered a lot in this first part. Delicious food, the cities, events, responsible travel, even the humble thistle. And we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore.
Indeed. We've only just begun our Scottish journey.
I'm ready for more. Stay tuned for the next part of our deep dive.
You know, going through this Love Scotland newsletter, it really hits you how much they emphasize experiencing Scotland authentically, not just seeing the sights, but really immersing yourself.
I agree. Going beyond the tourist facade and getting to the heart of it. And speaking of hearts, haggis. You mentioned it earlier. I have to admit, sheep's offal still sounds a bit intimidating.
I get it. I was hesitant too, the first time, but I wanted to give it a shot, and I'm glad I did.
Really?
It's surprisingly good. The spices and oatmeal give it this savory, almost muddy flavor,
Yeah.
and the texture is nice, rich, and crumbly.
Interesting.
But it's more than just the taste, it's the whole experience. Being in a pub with the locals, the toasts, the rituals, you really feel like you're connecting with the culture.
You're making it sound tempting. Maybe I am ready to face my haggis feels. It's funny how food can be such a gateway to understanding a culture, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's not just fuel, it's history, tradition, shared experiences.
Exactly. Which is why I think this focus on food in the newsletter is so smart.
It's inviting people to connect with Scotland on a deeper level.
And don't forget the Petticoat Tales shortbread. I'm still thinking about that one.
Oh, I know you are.
Even the names of Scottish dishes are so evocative. Petticoat Tales shortbread. It's like you can picture the kilts and the dancing.
It's true. That whimsy, that poetry in the language. It reflects the spirit of the culture. And speaking of which, that Blackness Castle exhibition about folklore. Walking through those old halls, surrounded by stories of mythical creatures and legends.
Chills just thinking about it. I've always loved stories like that, folklore and mythology. They give you a peek into a culture's imagination, their fears, hopes, dreams passed down for generations. What kind of stories are they featuring?
Well, they mentioned kelpies, those shape-shifting water spirits that lure people in, and selkies, creatures that can change from seals to humans,
Oh, I've heard of Silkies.
often tragic figures caught between two worlds.
Right.
Of course, no discussion of Scottish folklore is complete without the Loch Ness Monster. Nessie,
Nessie.
a creature that's captured imaginations worldwide.
It's amazing how these stories last for centuries, shaping a nation's identity. It makes you wonder about their impact on Scottish culture today. Do people still believe in them?
Good question. It's probably a bit of both. Folklore often blends with history and reality, especially in a country like Scotland, with its dramatic landscapes and rich history.
It feels like a place where the line between myth and reality could be a bit blurry. Ancient castles, misty lochs, rugged highlands. You wouldn't be surprised to stumble upon a fairy ring.
Exactly. It's that magic of Scotland. Imagination runs wild there. History feels ancient and present at the same time.
We've talked a lot about culture and history, but what about the natural beauty? The North Coast 500, those cliffs and beaches, it sounds incredible.
It's become quite the road trip destination. Driving those coastal roads through little villages, past ancient ruins, and always surrounded by stunning views.
The ultimate escape, to disconnect and reconnect with nature.
Exactly, which is why that pledge against irresponsible tourism is so important. The Highlands are fragile.
Absolutely. Finding that balance, experiencing beauty while preserving it. So we've got the Highlands, the lochs, the coast. What about other cities besides Edinburgh and Glasgow? Any other hidden gems?
The newsletter doesn't go into detail about others, but they do emphasize that all 8 cities have their own character. They mention Inverness, the gateway to the Highlands, And Aberdeen, a coastal city known for its granite buildings and its ties to the oil industry.
So much diversity in one country. You can go from cities to highlands to coastline all in a day.
That's what makes Scotland so appealing. Something for everyone.
Talking about all this, it's like this newsletter has given me wanderlust, a real desire to see Scotland for myself.
The power of a good story. They've woven these bits of information into something that captures the essence of the country.
It's an invitation to experience, explore, discover, and I'm definitely feeling that pull. Before we wrap up, I have to ask, what about you? What are you most curious about in Scotland now?
That's a tough one. So much has caught my interest. But I think I'd be most fascinated by those ancient standing stones and stone circles, shrouded in mystery. To stand among them, feeling that ancient energy. That would be something else.
I can picture it. Standing in the presence of something so old, so enigmatic, it's like touching a piece of history that goes back to the beginning.
Exactly. A reminder of how much mystery there still is.
Mm.
About the past, about ourselves.
Okay, you've convinced me. Standing stones are on my list now. It's funny how this deep dive has taken us from petticoat tail shortbread to ancient mysteries.
It speaks to the depth of Scotland's cultural and historical landscape.
And we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore.
Indeed. But we'll have to save that for next time.
Can't wait. This deep dive is turning into quite the adventure. For now, let's take a moment to appreciate everything we've learned and the excitement we've built.
Well said.
This deep dive into the Love Scotland newsletter has been quite a ride. From practical travel tips to ancient mysteries, it feels like we've only just scratched the surface.
It has been a whirlwind tour, hasn't it? This newsletter gave us a taste of Scotland's culture, food, landscapes.
Wow.
But what stands out to me is how it encourages exploration. Not just checking things off a list, but really engaging with the country.
Exactly. It's like they're saying, here's a glimpse, now go create your own story in Scotland. And there are so many stories waiting to be discovered, right?
Absolutely. If you're a history buff, you can trace the footsteps of royalty through Edinburgh Castle or explore the battlefields of Culloden. Or, if you're more of a nature lover, you could hike the Highlands, sail the coast, maybe even spot some puffins and seals.
Puffins. And for those seeking a more urban adventure,
Glasgow's art scene and architecture are calling.
it's amazing how much diversity they pack into one country. And that idea of Scotland as a place where myth and reality blur, it's really sticking with me. The folklore, the standing stones, Nessie, it adds a layer of mystique that's captivating.
It does, doesn't it?
Hmm.
There's an enchantment to Scotland, a feeling that anything is possible. That's why it draws so many people, I think. A place to let your imagination run wild, to connect with history, to experience wonder.
And even the everyday things seem to have a deeper meaning, like the thistle. This
Yeah.
humble flower becomes a symbol of resilience.
It's a great metaphor. The thistle, like the people, has weathered so much and emerged stronger. That spirit resonates, don't you think?
It does. I'm feeling inspired, energized,
Yeah.
a bit in awe of this country.
That's the power of this newsletter, I think. A renewed sense of curiosity, a desire to experience those wonders firsthand.
Well said. As we wrap up our Scottish journey, I have one last thought for you. Considering all we've learned, all the stories and inspiration, what aspect of Scotland speaks to you the most? What makes you want to pack your bags and go?
What a great question.
Yeah.
And I think we'll all have different answers depending on our own passions. Some might hear the call of the wild, the highlands, the coast. Others might be drawn to the cities, Edinburgh's history, or Glasgow's vibrancy. And some might simply want to savor a cup of tea and some petticoat tail shortbread, feeling that connection to the land.
I like that.
Whatever it may be, I hope this deep dive has sparked a bit of adventure in you.
It certainly has for me. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Scotland. And remember, don't let the journey end here. Keep diving, keep discovering. Until next time, happy travels.